Well, good morning, my friend, and welcome to the Pastor's Podcast. Good to have you with me on this Monday morning, and hope that you had a great day. Yesterday in church, we had a tremendous day in our services, and that was always exciting to see the Lord work in all the ways that He works, and people saved, people baptized, and I always enjoy a good day on Sunday. Helps your week go better. And it really encourages you as you continue to go soul winning, as you see people come in, and we can never stop trying to go after people. Just you never know who's going to come, who's going to get saved, who's going to get baptized, and which person's going to really get just in and involved. And had a lot of good victories yesterday morning and last night, and just being able to help people grow in the Lord and learning how to live this Christian life in a successful way. I hope that you've had a wonderful day as well as we get through the week here, and certainly would want to do that. Now, as we get into this thing, let me, if I can, kind of talk to you just a little bit about the most valuable asset. And that most valuable asset comes from 2 Kings chapter 22 and verse 19, which says, "Because thine heart was tender, and thou hast humbled thyself before the Lord, when thou heardest what I spake against this place, and against the inhabitants thereof, that they should become a desolation and a curse, and hast rent thy clothes, and wept before me, as I also have heard thee, saith the Lord." Now, when we talk about assets, there would be many arguments about what the most valuable asset one could have is. Now, some would say to invest in the stock market through mutual funds or 401k is likely the most valuable asset. And I'm not saying that they're not. But some would say, you need to invest in gold. That's always going to be around. While others will say, well, real estate, now that's the most valuable asset one can have. Now, though each of these are certainly great assets, and I'm not going to argue which one is the greatest between them, I don't believe that's the greatest asset one can have. Josiah discovered that the most valuable asset one can have, that asset is a tender heart. The tender heart kept Josiah from making many hurtful decisions that would not only have hurt others around him, but they would have hurt his own future. Now, his heart was so tender that he did whatever God told him to do. Now, the value of a tender heart cannot be overemphasized. When we study the scriptures, we find that those with hardened hearts could not even be influenced by God. What a sad day. But, in other words, God, the creator of the universe, couldn't get through to the heart of those who had hardened their hearts. But then when you look at those with a tender heart, you see God keeping them from doing things that would have hurt them. And you see God using them in a mighty way. So there are three very evident things about a person who has a tender heart. First, a person with a tender heart is willing to listen. Now, you can't help someone who won't listen. I wish I could. And there's people that come to church. They're there, but they don't listen. Now, it doesn't matter why they won't listen. It's the fact that they won't listen that keeps them from being helped. It is critical to have a listening ear to those who want to help. Now, you ought to have a listening ear to your parents, your pastor, those who are trying to help you. You ought to. One of the most frustrating things a pastor has is that he's trying to help people, but they just won't listen. I can only imagine. I've had this conversation with God many a time. And I say, God, I think I kind of get a small glimpse of what you go through, because as a pastor, you try to help people and they just don't listen. Yet, how many times has God told us not to do something and we don't listen? I don't understand how God doesn't get totally frustrated with us. Developing a listening ear, it's critical to your future. You ought to hang on to everything that is taught by your pastor that God has placed, by the pastor that God's placed in your life. Whether they're spiritual leaders, is your pastor, a parent, a Sunday school teacher, maybe it's a bus captain, a seasoned believer. I don't know. God's placed someone in your life. Now, you ought to be willing to listen to them so they can help you, because they can't help you if you don't listen. They can tell you, and you can even agree, but if you're not listening and doing, it's not going to help. Second, a person with a tender heart is willing to learn. So a learning heart is a growing heart. When you reach the point that nobody can teach you, you've reached the point that God cannot teach you. Now, how sad that is. Having a heart that's willing to learn only happens if you have a heart that's willing to listen. So you got to listen first. Then that listening ear needs to learn from what it's heard, because a learning heart is a listening heart that listens and adheres to the pastor that God's placed in their life. Third, a person with a tender heart is willing to do what they're told to do. Now, this is the key to a tender heart. You can listen and learn, but if you will not do, it won't matter how much you've heard and learned, you still got a hardened heart. A tender heart does not sit and critique and criticize, but it listens, learns, and puts into action the truths that it learns. The most valuable asset that you can have is a tender heart that is willing to listen, learn, and do what it has learned. Now, you ought to keep your heart tender. And if you'll keep your heart tender, you'll save yourself from much heartache. Oh, my friend, I wonder how many people have experienced great heartache simply because they won't listen, they won't learn, and they won't do what they've learned. So which category are you in? Are you listening, first of all? Are you even hearing? Are you at church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night? People, they teach you things that will help you in life. Second, are you learning? Are you just there? Is it just noise going in one ear and out the other? Or are you learning? Then third, are you doing what you've learned? There's a lot of people, they know what to do, but they won't do it. Can I tell you? Not to do it is just as bad as not listening and not learning. So become a person that listens, learns, and does. You'll be a person who has a tender heart. And the person with the tender heart is the person God can use mightily in a great way if they'll just learn to get that done. Well, my friend, I hope this is a great help to you today. Now, let's remember today and throughout this week, let's be good to everyone